What's going on, everybody? My name is Ben and welcome back to another episode here on Ben Builds. This is the FJ-2 Fury episode number 2. Today we're going to start in here, get some glue on some plastic and see how we do. Now, as I mentioned before, I've never built the Kitty Hawk kit before. I have no idea how this is going to go together, but I can tell that it is a little bit over-engineered just even starting out. I mean, we don't get to the cockpit until step number 3, and there's a lot of stuff to do in here. Plus, I was doing a little bit of research on the colors that we're going to need for this cockpit here, and we're going to need something very similar to this, kind of a lightish, kind of green color, but not exactly a typical olive green like something like this. Not like that at all. It's actually a bit more minty. It's a very strange color. Now, the color they call out for is actually hemp, C336, I think by Gunzi. I've ordered that, so we're going to try it out. But until then, we still have to contend with all the parts and pieces, and we have to see how this all fits together. So today, I want to go ahead and start out here by assembling the guns, assembling the gun bay, and then moving on into the nose and see how everything kind of goes together. I don't know really how far we're going to get, but let's go ahead and cue up that time lapse and get some glue on some plastic. Let's do it. All right, everybody, we are back and we've moved on to the intake trunking, and this is going to be a little difficult to go ahead and clean up. Now, we have a large view of the intake. You can see pretty far down in there. So to alleviate any issues, we're going to go ahead and clean up these areas, take off some of these large attachment points from when this was attached to the sprue. We also have some ejection marks on the inside. We need to go ahead and shave those down and just get everything kind of cleaned up. It's going to take some work, going to take some filing, and we're probably going to have to come back with some super glue and overcoat the inside with super glue and then sand that all down again to eliminate any of the seams. Now, I don't know how far back you're really going to be able to see because it's going to get dark in there pretty fast, but I know right around the opening, that's going to be right there where everyone's going to notice. So we have to go ahead and clean it up. Now, the overall fit, it's not great. There's a couple of issues here and there that it just doesn't quite fit all together, though that could have been user error. I might have maybe sanded off a little bit too much plastic. There's a couple of areas here and there that just need a little bit more attention, but I think some super glue ought to go ahead and take care of that. A little bit of sanding here and there. I think we are pretty much ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and use some sandpaper and polish everything out so we don't have any weird crazy seams or any sort of gouges or anything in the plastic, and then we'll move on and get this thing glued up. All right, now the intake is all mostly taken care of. Let's go ahead and turn our attention over to how everything kind of fits into the front nose area. Now this is where it kind of gets a little complicated. We have the cockpit, which has a gun bays on the right and left side. As you can see, the entire cockpit assembly with gun bays fits down on top of the intake trunking. Now the trunking itself plugs into the right or left side of the fuselage, and you have to make sure that you line up the gun ports and the gun bays themselves into the appropriate areas on the sides of the fuselage. Now this of course assumes that you're going to go ahead and have those gun bays open so you can see all the detail on the inside. If we pull out the intake, we can see that the cockpit lines up decently enough, but we do have a little bit of some issue lining up that gun bay with the open section in the side of the fuselage. Also, we have to keep in mind that when we put in the front cockpit with those guns glued onto the side of the cockpit sidewalls, you have to kind of press them down and forward because there's an actual opening that the guns are supposed to fit through. That's a little bit of an issue. Now, if we look at the other side of the fuselage, when we go ahead and put that down, we have a really difficult time getting everything sandwiched in. Now, when we're attaching the other side of the fuselage, we have to be very careful, like I said, of those cannons that protrude forward of the actual cockpit itself. They don't really fit all that well, so you have to kind of push them in and forward again so that you can line up those guns with the corresponding gun ports. Now, once we get those all kind of lined up, then you're left with trying to get the fuselage together. And if we actually look down inside the aircraft when everything is going together, it's pretty tight. It's going to take a little bit of some filing, a little bit of some finagling to get those parts and pieces to line up. And even then, the gun bays themselves don't exactly line up perfectly. Kind of frustrating, to be honest. Now, to solve this problem, I've come up with a little bit of an idea here that I think might work very nicely. You can see here on the side of the fuselage, we have these openings that correspond to the actual gun bays themselves. What I recommend doing is actually not installing the gun bays onto the sidewalls of the cockpit. Instead, go ahead and assemble the gun ports and the gun bays and all that good stuff, and then glue them directly to the fuselage so that you don't have to worry about lining everything else up. That's going to give you a much better fit with your cockpit sidewalls, and it's going to allow you to line up those gun bays and those gun ports exactly where they should be, so you don't have to really worry too much about it. So what I'm going to do now is something probably not recommended really. I'm going to remove the gun bays off of the cockpit, and then we're going to see how they work if you install them separately. Now this design isn't actually too bad. Everything is nicely compact, everything fits together decently. I would recommend though that because you have the sidewalls here on the cockpit that are actually the backs of the actual gun bays, you really got to be careful with how everything lines up. It doesn't always line up as perfectly as you'd want it. So here we have the gun bay itself. I'm going to go ahead and repair that, and we can place that directly onto the fuselage sidewall without much hassle. All we then do is just kind of clean up the area, make sure we don't have any locating tabs that are going to get in our way. And when we go ahead and install the cockpit, we can line that up just perfectly, a much better way to get this done, in my opinion, than having to go ahead and build up all the cockpit sidewalls and then the gun bays themselves, and then try to sandwich everything in there together. I think just take it stage by stage. And that is, of course, if you're going to install the guns and have them shown. This configuration also allows you to shift that gun bay forward or backward to line up with the opening, because it doesn't always line up exactly perfectly when you attach it to the sidewall of the cockpit. It's close, but I think you have a much better chance of lining everything up if you pull it off that sidewall and glue it directly into the fuselage. I think that's just a better way overall. Again, let's get a little bit of a close-up here. You can see what I'm talking about. I pulled the other gun bay off, and here we go. Here's the gun bay, and here's the opening of the fuselage. See how it has those two ports right in the front there? You have to put that bottom gun into that gun port, push it forward, and then you can go ahead and line it up with the actual opening for the hatch. And then you have your gun bay. I've never seen any Fury with that much of a gun barrel protruding from the front, but again, that's not that big of a deal. I think this is still a better way to do this, so you have much more control over the overall fit of all these parts and pieces. But again, this all assumes that you're going to be having one of those gun bays open or both of those gun bays open so you can see all the internals and the guns and the ammo and all that good stuff, which I'm not doing. I'm actually going to have this as clean and as sharp as possible with no extra hatches open or closed. I just want this as clean as I possibly can get it. Plus also with the fact that this is natural metal, I want to go ahead and make sure I don't have any things hanging off or any issues when I go ahead and polish this down and prime it and all that stuff, because natural metal is tough for me to do, so I don't want to have any extra issues. So let's go ahead and cue up a time lapse. We're going to glue all these parts and pieces in, get everything lined up, tackle a few more sub-assemblies, and we'll be back. We'll see how we do. everybody, we are back and we have the fuselage sidewalls mostly ready. We need to go ahead and give them one more sanding before we can go ahead and assemble everything together. We had a couple of ejection pins we need to go ahead and take care of, but we did that. It is drying now, so we are good with that. We did pour a little bit of super glue on the inside of the doors just so that we don't have any of those popping loose, and I think that's a really good way to go ahead and lock everything in place. We also built up the ejection seat. The ejection seat is actually pretty nice. We have a lot of detail in there. We could add a little bit more, to be honest, but we do have a nice chunk of detail. And I think these will look pretty decent when we go ahead and add the seat belts and we add the seat pads and all that good stuff. Now for the cockpit itself, I did go ahead and remove those gun bays off those side walls, and I think this is much cleaner and much easier to paint. I would complain a little bit about the rudder pedals. They are kind of an issue to go ahead and glue into the side there, but overall, there's a lot of detail here. And I think this is going to look really cool when I get my paint. We can overcoat it and paint it up. I think it's going to be that kind of greenish color on the inside with black consoles and black switches and all that for the actual instruments. I think this is going to look pretty sharp. So overall, the kit is going together very well. It is a little over-engineered, like I mentioned before. The rumors are true. There's a lot going on in this kit, but that's okay. Really a nice little kit. It's got a lot of detail, a lot of potential. Like I said, I'm not going to be installing the guns into those gun bays. Maybe for the FJ-3, I might consider throwing some guns in and I can test out my theory again. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Until our next episode, you know the drill. Go out there, get yourself some bench time, have some fun, build something cool, and we'll see you back here on the next episode of the FJ-2 Fury by Kitty Hawk. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll see you soon.